Hi, and welcome to the fourth episode of Trail Society. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger.
And I'm Hillary Allen, still recording from my van, but this time in Oregon.
Yeah, and Keely is back home, and we're going to talk about the race that she was at the last time we recorded. I'm recording from a ADU in Bozeman, Montana, getting ready for a wedding that we'll talk about in a little bit. But Keely, you're home in Portland. You were not home in Portland last time we chatted. How did Lake Sonoma 50 go?
Oh man, Sonoma was great. But before I dive into that, Hillary, why are you in Oregon and you didn't tell me?
I'm literally on the most southern terminus. I'm just, I'm trying to be below the radar. I'm trying to figure out the most creative way to get to Corinne's wedding. And right now it's going north to Oregon because I had enough of California. I'm sorry. I needed a break. And so then north to Oregon, and then I'm going to head, east to Montana. So,
okay.
Sorry, I'm actually not going to make it to Portland. So that's why I didn't tell you.
No worries. I'll let it slide this time. But
just this once, though. This once, Hilly.
This once. Mm-hmm. Next time you have to come through. But yeah, I am not in California anymore. I am in Oregon, and Sonoma was awesome. It was the first time Sonoma was ran after the big fires they had in Healdsburg last year. So it was kind of like sentimental being back, but it was also really cool to see the community kind of come back together, be really excited about the race, and also be really excited about all the work they'd put through it, because the trails were in phenomenal condition for how big that fire was and how much destruction was there. So it was really impressive with how well done the trails were. And the course was as unrelenting as ever. It definitely was a little hotter than previous years. I stayed with a really lovely host family. And when I first got there, they were like, oh my goodness, we were so upset that we moved the race to September because we told Skip it's always triple digits. We don't know how you're supposed to run in this. But luckily it didn't hit triple digits. It was just in the mid 90s, which still felt way hotter than previous years. Pair that with the course being a little bit less shaded due to all the fires and everything. Definitely resulted in a pretty hot, strenuous day. But overall, it was so amazing. As always, the community there is next to none. And it's always fun to be at that race. So it was really great. And I'm happy to be home.
And she won. What you're missing there, Hillary, wow, that was a weird way to say Hillary. I had a dental procedure right before this, so bear with my my mouth movements on this, but Hillary was there to witness Keely's 50-mile endeavor. Hillary, can you tell us how that all panned? What did you witness out there?
I think in one word, I could say greatness, because it was, it wasn't, triple digits, but it was 98. It was ridiculously hot. And so, this is just the current theme that we're seeing. I think Lake Sonoma really is not a battle of attrition, but it kind of is when you get it to the heat, but you still have to keep on moving super fast. I know Keely went through the halfway mark at 3:25. She had her eyes set and her legs set on, coming as close to 7 or breaking 7 as possible. And I just think the conditions as far as heat, didn't really play to that, but that's still, she ran a super smart race. And Keely was 4th overall. Maria Mendoza won the men's race in 7 hours, 10 minutes, and Keely finished in 7 hours, 40 minutes. It hot out there. I couldn't even imagine running that back stretch, with no trees and kind of all of that stuff. And so it was really impressive, and it was super awesome to witness that and to see her do that. And so, I think because of the conditions, the overall field, it was definitely affected. There was, 100 finishers and 60 dropped. So that's a fair amount. And of the people that did not finish, and then 38 men. But the overall spread of those 100 finishers were 60 men and 40% women. I say percent. There was 60 men and 40 women. So it was an even 60-40 spread. And so, this is kind of what, Corinne, I forget if it was you or Keely, but Corinne, I think you said a couple episodes back that these, these smaller grassroots community-driven events, it'll draw more women. And I mean, Skip, the race director, and Holly, his wife, like they operate this through Healdsburg Running Company, and it's so welcoming. It's absolutely incredible. And I mean, I know that there's even a couple people that weren't included in these finisher stats that decided to run the race like early. I think the race started at 6:30 and they decided to start at like 4 a.m. or something just to beat the heat because they knew they were going to be slower. And so I just think it's a really awesome community event. And yeah, so that just encourages more, I think, women and people to show up. But I think that was really cool to see how strong the women's field was. I mean, I know Sarah Cumming, she finished second. Well, she missed the last aid station, so she had to. She was bumped down to third, and I'm blanking on the third place. What?
Tina Randrup. She's a young up and comer from Seattle. So
yeah, from the Bay Area originally. She's got her folks live in the Bay Area. She's super fast. She's going to be real one to keep your eyes on for sure.
Yeah.
But for those who don't know about the Lake Sonoma course, there's the last aid station. It's an out and back to the aid station, and it'd be really easy, particularly in a quieter race like this, and maybe not as many people out on the course, to miss that. But it's not an insignificant amount of time. Like it's a downhill out to the aid and then back uphill. So they did the right thing with bumping those spots around, but that had to be a bummer for her in second too, missing that. I had not heard that. So that's really interesting. Yeah. And then
so instead of just like, they did like kind of an appropriate time penalty, but it was really close. I think it was 7 minutes between the second and third. And so that could easily be 7 minutes. And especially if you need to put on, get some ice, because that's a really hot section, you could add up minutes. So
and it's an out and back. So you see each other too. Right. Like that's a big thing too, is that on these out and back courses, where everyone is. And this additional out and back late in the race is like, this person's only a couple minutes back from me, or, I'm closing on this person. So that could have been interesting if it actually panned out that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a bummer too, because I know that Sarah was like looking for that aid station, just never found it. She was so tired and like needed her water. And so, yeah, to your point, it would have been really cool if we could have seen that race unfold a little bit from there too, because who knows what would have happened.
Yeah. And then one thing to mention in these results, is we've been talking a lot about percent back for the first place female in the event. And, normally in most races, particularly marathon and under, it's about 10%. We look at like world record splits and so on. Courtney was exceptional with an 8%. Keely, what was your percent back from Mario Mendoza?
It was like around 6.
Yeah. So really, really close, a ways under that 10% back. So I think that was to me, that was one of the coolest stats to come out of the race weekend, was like, okay, women, 50-mile racing, like running hard, dealing with the conditions that everyone had to deal with. Like, what did that look like? So the men's field was not a slouchy men's field. Like Mario Mendoza is a fast runner. So I thought that was very, very cool. Major kudos to you. We also have a bunch of results that people sent in to us as well, with some women just crushing it all over the place. Keely, can you help us summarize those that came in?
Sure. Yeah. So there was an FKT attempt in Canada on the Bruce Trail, and it's 900 kilometers long. If you guys know anything more about it, let me know. But there was a woman named Karen Holland who completely smashed the old men's FKT by over 4 hours, which is awesome. And we'll link to that article in the show notes if you guys want to read up on that. We also got a call out towards UTHC, which is a race on the Ultra Trail World Tour in Canada as well. Ultra Trail Hurricana. Their mascot's a wolf, which is timely because the glass I'm drinking out of also is covered in wolves. Anyways, that's a side note. There were 20 women finished in total. So the field wasn't very large. So the percentage of women finishing was pretty low. However, there were 2 in the top 5, with the first place woman getting second overall, Jenny Quilty, and then Marianne Hogan was second female, and Katie Asmuth was third female. And they were all just kind of crushing into those top spaces, which was really cool to see, especially in, a high publicity race. The tour was definitely promoting that race pretty highly. And then Grayson Murphy, who everyone knows from the track. She's also a phenomenal mountain runner. She's been taking a tour to Europe, and she, in her most recent race, was 5th overall in a 15-kilometer race, which is definitely defying our stat odds with with that short of a distance, coming in that high on the podium is pretty incredible. So any other obviously like really big women accomplishments or any sort of accomplishments in the sport, you just send our way and we'll make sure to touch on them in future episodes. But yeah, those were the big ones that we got notes on from this past weekend.
One thing to note about that too. So Ultra Trail Harricana there's always a high attrition there because it's late in the fall. It's oftentimes really wet. It's 125 kilometers, but it runs pretty slow as well. It doesn't have it's got vert, but it's not, it's really technical though. It's very rooty and rocky and slick. So that's interesting. And then you pair that against Grayson's 15 or 16K, which is also not like an uncompetitive race. It was a world mountain running, it was a world mountain running World Cup. I think it was heavily a Spanish. I think that's the big draw, is a bunch of Spanish mountain runners who specialize in these short distance races. But to finish 5th overall in a race that is less than 20 kilometers that's huge, particularly when it's not this is more than a local race, right? It is a World Cup level race. I don't know exactly what the normal turnout is for it, but that I thought was really, really cool to see. And I think she won by 17 minutes too, or something, which is also just insane. So bravo to all the women who crushed it this past week. But yeah, slide into our DMs with more information as results come in, FKTs or otherwise. Super excited to hear more from y'all. But our topic today is kind of timely. We're going to be talking about work-life balance and partnerships and friendships in the sport. And to kick that off, I'm getting married this week on Saturday in a couple days. And this topic came about because I don't know if I'm going to change my last name or not. And so we were thinking about gender norms. And I grew up as just Corinne. I never identified as Corinne Malcolm because I didn't grow up with 6 other Corinnes. I was the only one. So I've never been oh, I am Corinne Malcolm, versus my partner. He's always been Stephen Ettinger. And he's always identified as that, these 2 names. And he told me that he didn't like how Corinne Ettinger sounded. And so he doesn't care what I do, but at the same time, it's this interesting conundrum, right? To be in this position where it's do I keep my own last name for, because I'm an independent, I'm my own person, I have my own identity. Do I change my last name so that our future family, is a unit, that we have this we're the Ettingers together? I don't know. And I keep asking all of my friends what to do, because I think it's there's this idea of oh, it's really feminist to keep your own last name, but I'm at a loss as what to do. I don't think we have to decide by Saturday, but the time is running out if I have to decide on Saturday. So help me, slide into my DMs. Let me know. What do you guys think? What should I do?
Yeah, I think this is a tough one, Corinne, because I guess when you're talking about these gender norms and what we're used to seeing in traditional marriages is women changing their name to the men's, to me, that what comes with that is a change in responsibility. Now, obviously that's not necessary and that's not something that needs to happen. But do you feel some of your hesitation towards changing your name is because you don't want to change your role or become a different kind of role? Do you feel that's hindering you?
I don't think so. I think that it's I don't know. There's the logistic loopholes more than the oh, my role as a person is going to change. We've had these conversations though. I feel very fortunate. My partner's I don't know. I feel he's a really wonderful human being, hence the reason I'm marrying him. But we've had to have these conversations about child rearing, right? He is going into emergency medicine. I have this really flexible job where I'm writing and I'm running and I'm coaching, and I don't have to be in an office, which affords us flexibility to do things on his schedule. And all of a sudden when you factor kids into that, it's is it still his schedule? Or what about on his day off? Does that still mean that he has to pull his weight in the house type of thing? Because when we're talking about this more, is that women, generally speaking, I can't remember the number of hours it is a week, but it's women on average, even I think in the most progressive of households, carry the burden of unpaid labor, right? If it's cleaning, if it's meal prep, if it's grocery shopping, if it's errands, if it's child rearing, all these things, there's all this unpaid labor that even I think in the most even of situations, the most equal of situations, falls predominantly on the female partner in a heteronormative relationship. And so it is an interesting conundrum to try to work through. I don't think my name thing is hung up on that so much, but like, we'll see it. And what we're going to talk about, now more than anything is like, we're all in relationships, or at least the three of us are all in relationships. And, we rely on this other person to help us out in sport, and being three women in the sport, that's kind of, I feel like, normally we serve a supporting role in society in relationships. And all of a sudden we flipped the script on all of our significant others, making them show up. And I'm kind of interested in both your personal experiences with that as women out in the world racing, and having this this significant other that is or isn't there to support you. What has that been like? And I know, Keely, you've got some interesting stories about traveling internationally with that. And I'm really curious to hear this story that came out of South Africa.
Yeah. So in 2018, I was fortunate enough to go to South Africa, to Cape Town, for Ultra Trail Cape Town, which is like a little over 100 kilometers through the beautiful trails around Cape Town. However, it is still like pretty behind, I guess, in relation to the United States of America and in how they view women and their role in the society. And so we were driving out to a safari, and I was with my current boyfriend at the time, and the bus driver was asking like everyone what they were doing there. And I said something along the lines of like, oh yeah, like I'm here for a race and he's here to support me. And the South African driver was kind of like, sorry, he's to support you. And I was like, yeah. And he just kept asking the same question. And finally he announced to the whole safari that, listen up, this man here is here to support this female. And he was so shocked that he brought it up like 3 or 4 more times along the drive. And it was really just shocking to me, but also like really, really good for me to experience that we are pretty lucky to have this role reversal without like actual like conscious thought. I never thought consciously that we were reversing these roles. It was really just, this was my thing and he's there to support me, and I would do the same for him. But I guess like that's not the commonplace for every area of the world. And so it was really good to have my eyes open to that. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Hillary, do you have any personal experiences with that, either in the US or internationally, or just like what, like the expectations that even your community puts on you?
Yeah. And so this is an interesting topic because I think it does depend on the partner, right? I think, and it was actually really cool now to see JT, Keely's current partner, support her at Lake Sonoma. And obviously I didn't see it in Western personally, but I know that he was there, and like what it really means to like be a supportive partner. And regardless of gender, or whether it's like the woman is elite and the man is not elite in this certain, space. But I just think it's actually really special there too, because it is a role reversal, historically speaking. And so, I mean, I have similar experiences, maybe mine, not as positive as Keely's current relationship. But I mean, I think it can be hard. It's something that I've talked numerous times with to Corinne about, like struggling with finding this partner. I mean, I do remember a partner that I had, and we couldn't find that balance. And it was something that ultimately kind of like put a rift between us. I still think it can matter on confidence, and having a woman that is strong and capable in a certain thing, especially athletically, that can kind of form a little bit of a almost just barrier. And in my example in particular, it was the fact that, of course, like this partner was very fast. And so he was faster than me, like, at maybe 2 hours and under, like he was definitely faster than me. But then anything over, that where I spend, it's like my sweet spot, like the longer we go, the better I am. And that sweet spot, like he couldn't hang. And it turned into like, then ultimately, instead of just admitting that it was, I was okay and like letting me go, it became kind of just this negative thing where it almost would start fights. And so I think there's, obviously depends on the partner and if they can kind of take more of a supportive role. But I think men in general are used to being, so much almost, stronger, more capable. And this was also something that I didn't appreciate too, is like he'd spend far less time training and still be able to go really fast and then, beat me on a workout. And then I was like, all right, cool. You want to come with me on my long run? And, then he wouldn't be able to hang. And it was something that I almost got, it became this almost competitive thing. And I've heard, David and Megan Roche talk, like they're a couple where they're both, respectively, elite runners. And, when they run together and they train together, David has to approach his training differently. I remember him saying to me, like, he lets Megan lead and she sets the pace. And so if it's her easy run, like he's kind of going along with for the ride, so to speak. But then to kind of, conversely, just this morning, I had a workout to do, and I was joined by my partner, and he was just like, he comes from more of a cycling background, and, he was like, yeah, you do your thing. Like, you go off, like, go rage. Like, I had to do these efforts. We're kind of doing a run together. And then once I had to do my intervals, I would go off and run, and he was like cheering me on. And then I would turn around, come back to the recovery, like, do a little high five, and then go do my little, my effort again. And he was very supportive. And we were talking about on the way back, he's like, yeah, I've had to do this. He's like, this is the first time this has ever happened to me. Normally I do this to other people, like friends, like where, I'm like, oh, okay, like I got to go do an interval. So see you when I see you later. And it was really refreshing to have, like, there was no ego. There was no kind of like, oh, I need to try to like keep up with you. I literally was honest with him, and I was like, I don't want you doing these with me. I want to do them by myself. So I think it's so individual, and it just depends. I think it's really, like Corinne said, she's talked about this a lot with her partner and, with Steven, and now he's going to be, he's been an amazing part of your life through your whole progression from, a professional skier, biathlete, to professional runner. And, there's a ton of ebbs and flows when it comes to that. And it can be, and then Steven was, two-time runner-up to be on the Olympic team for mountain biking. And so, Corinne's been there too. So I think it's a really interesting thing if like you're with, high achieving individuals, especially in sport, you just have to approach it with open communication and like kind of no rules apply.
Yeah. Ego. I think the ego thing was super important. Like, it's not about you, like that. And that goes both ways. Like, I have been dropped by Steven on so many workouts, or like even like my male teammates, when I did biathlon, and I would get so upset. And then I'd be like, oh, they're kind of the best in the world. I should probably like chill out. Okay. Like, my ego needed a break because my ego was upset by it. And it's like the ego goes both ways. And the ego in relationships needs to be like discussed and checked at the door, and know what the purpose is of the run or the ride or whatever it is. And this goes beyond like elites. This is just like anyone out there training with your significant other, because that can be really frustrating, right? If particularly when there's like a speed mismatch. And so it's like, we have a communication where it's like, what is the point? What is the purpose of this? Like, are we doing this together? Like, is someone going to go sendy? Like, is someone going to go really hard? Like, when we're on the mountain bike, Steven knows that he's going to wait for me on the downhills. Like, he'll like ride until like a good stopping spot and then wait for me, because I'm a little bit slower. And then like, same with running, like I can drop him on the more technical downhills and then I wait for him. And so it's like this balance point. And like, I think it's really great to be like, I love that Steven's not a runner. Like, he's gotten really good at running, but it's not his sport. And so we get to share, we understand each other's passions. And actually the only argument we've ever had about sport was, and this is going to, I think, trend into kind of a continuing conversation about balancing sport with the rest of your life, is that he really wanted to go downhill skiing or backcountry skiing. And I was in like training for, I don't know, probably an early season 100K or something. And I was in the point of training where I really couldn't blow it off to go backcountry skiing that day. Like, I really needed to go do this run. And he was like, well, I don't understand. It's not your job. And this, I don't think I like had the contract I have at this point either. Like, it was my job, but it wasn't my job type of thing. And he comes from professional cycling where he was making really good money. It really was like, that was his full-time job. And so I was like, well, this is my job. Like, my coaching and my running and my writing, it is all one thing. So like, I think I shot daggers out of my eyes when he said, why can't you come skiing with me? Running's not your job. So partners, egos checked, be supportive. But like, I joke with athletes, and I think all three of us are coaching people right now. Keely, you're coaching some folks as well.
I coach a couple. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like, and those people are going to be in relationships oftentimes. And I joke with my coaching clients, we have not had a divorce yet that was because of running. Because a lot of people come in, both men and women, and they say, hey, I want to step up from the 50-mile distance to the 100-mile distance. And my significant other, my wife, my husband, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, they're concerned that I already trained this much, and they're worried that I'm going to have to train this much, more, significantly more to meet this goal. And they're worried about that. And so I think it's important to recognize, independent of the level of athlete you are, elite, front of the pack, mid pack, backpack, whatever, whoever you are in your relationship, that dynamic, like there is a balancing component to exercise with the rest of your life. And that also means a balance for your support system too. And so I'm wondering, do you guys have any advice for athletes, for either people who are the supporting role in a relationship, or let's say primary athlete? They're the person who's training for the race most recently, maybe, like advice for them to find balance in that? Because that is really complicated, I think.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'll chime in too, because this is a conversation that I have a lot. And actually one of my favorite, I shouldn't say this, but it's a great, I shouldn't say favorite, but I'm really enjoying this dynamic of coaching. I'm coaching a married couple. And so it's awesome. And so for what I say, and, like they live in North Carolina, and one woman, she's definitely more accomplished. And so she has these very competitive goals. And her wife also, she tries to take a more supporting role, but she is still trying to run and work towards her own goals, which are very important to her. So it's really cool to have to, we try to do workout days on the same day. They're not the same workout, but they can kind of do it together and be each other's support system. So I think for me, what's worked is just communication, getting the other person involved, whether I'm coaching them directly or not. Another one of my athletes who I coached previously, I would get on these athlete calls and I would talk to his wife too. And, she'd just join in, or she would just be like, hi, Hillary. And then, it's like, okay, so really tell me what's going on. How tired is he? Is this okay? And so just, like really involving, it's a team effort, right? You're coaching these people. And, even we're talking about training, it's a daily endeavor. It's a lifestyle. And so it's not just about the specific run. It's about everything else to, get that run done. And so, yes, it involves significant others. Absolutely. But it's also talking to the people that you're coaching, or talking to the people that, your significant other or your friends. And, there's all these moving pieces. And if it's not the partner themselves, it's, considering family time, all of these other things that you have to consider. It's like literally, typically speaking, my long runs would be on the weekends, even though I have like a very flexible schedule. But sometimes people, they can't do that because they're dads or moms and they want to have a family day. And so and again, like Corinne said, training time is away from them. And then also you want to sleep. So you can't do these runs at 4 a.m. every day. It's just not sustainable. Or to appease a partner, right? If you want to, do things with them. And I was getting into this trap too, of like doing my workout and then wanting to do something active with my partner, and then ending up doing, 2-a-days. And then I was just freaking exhausted. And then no wonder we'd fight, because I was just tired and hungry all the time.
Yeah. Keely, I know JT is not really a runner. He's an avid mountain biker and cyclist. And so I know that you have, through injury, have kind of picked up biking more. All three of us through injury have picked up biking more. Yay. It's going to become a biking podcast. I know that you've picked up the bike, and like I said, like I ski with Steven, I climb with Steven. How has that been an addition to your training, right? Because that's got to have a balance point there to make sure that you have that time. Like, how do you find the balance of enjoying and wanting to have that time with him that's active, at the same time, like balancing that with your training? Because I think that could speak to everyone who's trying to balance those two things.
Totally. Yeah. Because obviously, to Hillary's point, like I could dig myself into a hole trying to prioritize that every day. I think the good thing that I've been trying to articulate to some of the ladies that I work with, as well as for my own personal life, is that it's like they need to be viewed as two separate things. My training is one thing. And then when I'm not in my training, I turn my brain off from my training and I don't let that absorb all my thoughts, because I find that in the past, I just wasn't present. And I think that just puts a really big toll on the relationship. And so then if say I do my training for the day, that takes up 2 or 3 hours, I turn my brain off from my training so it's not absorbing my thoughts, then it's like we have valuable time together, or we can go spend time on the mountain bike, but neither of those things have pressure behind them. It's never like oh, I finished my training because we must go do this. We try to like use mountain biking as like a way to fuel both of our like senses of adventure. And so if there's one day that just like gets out of control, where we're like doing house projects or sitting in traffic and we don't have time to get out and mountain bike, like we don't beat ourselves up about it. We view it as something that's just like way more fun, and something that is like extra bonus on top of like the other time we get to spend together. And I just think like that's what's been really advantageous with this, is that it's like, I can't put pressure on all of these things, right? Like running is going to be a higher priority. I'm going to get it done. That's my running, tie a bow on it, put it aside for the day, and then go about the rest of the day, trying to like not have all those like emotions around the running, and just have fun and be present.
Yeah, I think I like that. And I know you're a morning runner. And I think, one, it lets you get it done before the day. But I know for all the athletes that I work with who are parents, who have kids as well, if they don't get out in the morning, the likelihood of the run happening goes way, way down, because all of a sudden you're trying to get out after work, and like, trying to even double after work can be hard. So trying to get out for your primary run or do a workout after work is darn near impossible. I know people who do it for sure, but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you go and do this thing, you put a bow on it, it's done. And I think that's what the parents I work with have showed me, is that it's like getting their run done makes them a better parent. It makes them more present for their partner. It makes them a better employee or boss or whatever it is that they do during the day. And so it's one of those things where it's like, yes, your training is going to be inherently selfish. So egos aside, open communication with your coach and with your significant, whoever your support system is, be it kids, be it pets, be it significant others, like open communication with those people is going to be huge. And then like trying to figure out how you do that thing, you put it aside so that you can be present for all the other things that require your energy and your focus and your love the rest of the day. And I think that goes, we're all just going to have to get better at that as our families change and grow and develop over the coming decade. Because I feel like I'm learning from my athletes and from the women and men that I look up to in this sport, who are rocking it with a kid or 2 kids or 3 kids and dogs and all this kind of stuff. Like, it makes me feel like it is sustainable and possible, but I know that they are time management wizards. Is there anything else, negatives, positives, of like, being the supporter versus, like how do you fit into both those roles that we haven't talked about that we should address, as far as like qualities that can be shared or not shared? Hillary, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think this is interesting. It all goes off of preference. And of course, I am someone who learns by mistakes or learns the hard way. So, I figure out something that I need based on an experience that didn't kind of work out so well, right? And I think maybe a lot of us are like that. That's how you learn. But I think, all of these things is kind of into this bigger conversation about boundaries. I think this is really important, kind of just like, okay, this is my time to do this. This is my time to do this. Like, so I think it's about perspective. I know personally, I can be all in on one thing and very driven. And so, if I put a lot of mental stress towards running or, for instance, doing a workout like just this morning, it can be very stressful. And if my partner is adding to that stress, if I'm worried about if he's going to like run faster than me or something like that, just because, that happens if guys, sometimes guys who come from Max, he like comes from a professional cycling background. So he's a very good athlete. And I'm just like, I just don't even want you to come and do this. Like, I'm just going to do this by myself. Like, I need this to be my thing. But that's something that I know based off of past experiences. Like, if you let kind of the competitiveness kind of get in, it's really nice that he's there to just balance and be like, literally, I think his favorite thing to say is no stress. And I'm like, I can just be super stressed. But, so like he can kind of put like, calm me down, like even me out. And I think that's good. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be your partner. It can be your coach or your friend or just someone to kind of bounce off those ideas or those, thoughts and feelings with. I mean, I have this conversation a lot of times with people that I coach because, maybe their significant other isn't a runner or isn't an ultra runner. So they don't really get it. But I think more often than not, it comes with more of these hardships with balancing partnerships and training come with two ultra runners, right? Or two like endurance athletes. But I think it just comes with knowing thyself and then being able to, again, like Corinne mentioned, communicate and, figure that out. But for me, that's one of the main qualities that I can speak to, is because I'm definitely the intense one. So I need someone else to make me more even keeled.
I think that is really nice to not have a partner for me that's not into ultra running, because I have like two different audiences to run ideas off of. I have one that's kind of like a very unbiased non-runner mind, like slate. And then I have like other people that are very invested in running, and they'll give me the opinion in relation to running. Right. So for instance, like if I'm being like very stubborn about eating, to my partner who's not into ultra running, he's just kind of like, what are you doing? Just eat, whatever. Right. And if you're around like maybe people who are more into running, they're going to give you a more running biased opinion. Like, oh yeah, maybe like you don't have to. Whereas like, it's kind of nice to have those balancing of opinions. And so, yeah, I think having obviously some people in your life that are runners and those who are not, it's kind of a nice balance.
Yeah. I don't think you can expect, I mean, I think this was I think is it Esther Perel? She's like a relationship guru. Her talks are phenomenal. She's got TED Talks. They're great. Maybe we'll link one of them in the show notes. She's really cool talking about relationships and current relationship dynamics in a modern society. And the pandemic heightened this, was that we expect our partner to be our everything, to be our romantic interest and our romantic significant other, to be our confidant, to be our best friend, to be our family, to be all of these things. And it's not fair to the other person that this person has to be everything to you. And so it became, and because we treat them like family and our best friend, we sometimes don't treat them well, because we can treat family like garbage and they still have to love you because they're family. Versus if you treated a best friend like that, which is how we try to, maybe view those partnerships, is that best friends don't stick around if you treat them like garbage, right? So it's like, you got to figure out, are they family or are they a best friend? And so Stephen and I had to take that approach with running too. Like there are people that I talk to about running and it's not Stephen, because he could not listen to any more of it, which I think is totally fair. Hence the reason I talk to all of you now about running. But he says, tell me if it's someone that we care about. If Keely or Hillary go do something really epic, I want to know. But I don't care about, this professional runner who I know nothing about. Okay. Like, focus on the people that are part of our lives. And so I think that balance is really important. It allows you to kind of separate. It allows running to not be all consuming. And I think that is very, very healthy. I think it can be a very slippery slope when it becomes all consuming in your personal life, in your relationships, in your family life, right? Trying to find some balance there is really important. And I think what we're going to dive into now, if we didn't miss anything, is talking about, we had a lot of viewers, listeners, whatever you are, to message in and essentially say like, hey, what about female friendship? What about jealousy amongst other female runners? What does that look like? And I know that we've all had our own personal experiences with, obviously I consider you both my female friends, and competitors and training partners and all those things, but that's a hard balancing act, just akin to middle school girls being mean. Like adult women can be mean too. So I think, Hillary, this was something that was put into your inbox. And so I'm kind of curious if you want to get us started here a little bit on, how do we create like maybe healthy or good relationships with other women? And what does that look like right now in our society and in our sport, as far as women supporting women type of thing?
Right. And this is a topic that I think, it's ongoing. And so, first of all, I think it revolves a lot around self-confidence, right? We're in the world of sport and, I love it on the start line of a trail race where I can hug my competitors. It's like, a family of sorts. And then I think I have this line in my book because it's literally what I think. I love them, but then as soon as that gun goes off, I literally say in my mind, all right, it's time to slay these bitches. It's like I have this line, but at the same time, then, if I'm in a race of either of you and you beat me, like I'll hug you at the finish line, I think it's okay to have conflicting emotions, to love someone and want to kick their ass at the same time, because I love you ladies, but if we're going to be racing together, sorry, I want to finish ahead of you both. And I know that you feel the exact same way about me. And so I think that it's like, I think sometimes the pressure, and maybe this is societal pressure, maybe I'll get like too deep, but this is just something that I've noticed. I think that societal pressure of women to be, to be pretty and to be polite and to be, not competitive or too confident. Like, what? No, you can be all of those things at once and you can still be fierce. And I think the more that we embrace those different sides of us, instead of being like almost fake, because I've encountered this a lot where women are like, oh, like this is like, welcome, you're so great. And then I hear, people talking bad about you behind your back. Right. I think that there's room for all of these things to still train with strong female runners. I think that's important to have female friendships to talk about these things, whether they're older than you, but also even if they are your competitor. I think because, you're going to be like, you're experiencing the same thing. It's important to talk about it. And I think it was hard for me to navigate when I first came into the sport. I mean, I've definitely experienced this whole like mean girl. If anyone hasn't watched that movie, just watch it, then you'll know what I mean. Just this whole thing about the mean girl, the fake thing about welcoming them, but really just trying to undercut them every chance you get. And I think it's interesting because we talk about how there's not as many females in the sport. And I think some females like that because then they can be the center of attention. But I really believe that a rising tide raises all ships. And so the more supportive and inclusive that I can be for other women, even though that might cut down my spot at the podium one day or even in the current race, that to me is bringing more people and growing my sport that I love so much. And this has taken me a while to get to. I think at first when I came into the sport, I was more about this thing is like, no, I need to be number one. I can't have other women who are close friends who are going to be my competitors because it's going to take things away from me. But I think the more that I realize that we can sharpen each other's, like knives, right? Like my coach says, steel sharpens steel. And so we're aiding one another. The more I've adopted that mentality, it's this whole idea, I think in the culture now is women supporting other women. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast. I think that it makes the most strides and makes the most improvements. But I think it's hard to get there and it has to start individually because I think we can get carried away in the uber competitiveness of it. And especially when women are a lesser percent of the field in general.
So I think I'm just going to jump in here. I think what's really interesting about this though, too, is that and we're seeing this in our sport right now is that, in society right now, we both want women not to be bossy, to be polite, to be approachable and dignified and all these things. But we also applaud women for doing things that are traditionally masculine, even if it's like, I was listening to a podcast the other day and it's like, girls who gravitate towards physics or gravitate towards, a field that's not traditionally female. Like we might applaud that more. So society is kind of trying to steer the ship a little bit right now. And so most recently in our sport, we see someone like Sabrina Stanley get like pooped all over. Can we say shit? I'm going to say shit all over because she vocalizes what she wants. And the truth is that most women standing on the starting line, they have those same internal thoughts, but Sabrina says them in interviews. And I applaud her for that because I think that is important that we're seeing that in our sport. And it's like, there's a side conversation of, do we frown upon this in women so much because there is a subset of our sport that also thinks that sport is only about community and being out on the trail adventure together as opposed to competition, like there's, as opposed to like professionalism in the sport and competition in the sport. And this is kind of a side topic, but I think that there's a lot of interrelation here, or like intersectionalism here, between like what society wants, what trail culture wants, what women want. And I think it gets like jumbled all together, and that it's hard for women to maybe, I don't know, like find their voice in the sport or how they're going to portray themselves in the sport. And that can come across as like inauthentic, right? Because, they see what Sabrina does and she gets shit all over for it. And so I think it's hard to navigate that. And I'm wondering, like, why is it that, I mean, we can go back to middle school, right? Where like girls are not always nice to one another, and maybe that's competition and whatnot. But I'm just curious, as like, do either one of you, Keely, maybe you got some ideas on this as to like, why do we see these things present themselves within sport in general, within women's sport in general? Is there a reason why, it can be hard sometimes to be best friends with your competition?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I realized a while ago was talking with Megan Hicks of Iron Far. She was saying how up until recently, all of the women they would interview before a really big race would say like, oh, I just want to give it my all out there. Like really excited to be here. And no one would come out and say, yeah, I'm fit right now. I'm going to go try to win. Right. And all the men would, every single man they interviewed would say, I'm going to try to win, all of these things. And I think that's because we are kind of living this like double life, right? There's a part of us that wants to be this really confident athlete. And there's a part of us that's not quite used to that. And society shuns us for it. And so I think we're lucky that, or I guess not lucky, but we obviously are surrounded by a lot of women who exude this confidence. And I think it's becoming more commonplace for women to talk to this confidence. However, there's a lot of women in this sport and in the world who are just not as confident as a lot of the people that we associate with on the regular and who we think of when we're talking about this kind of context. And I think when you're a little less confident, like this can lead to a lot of like intimidation from those who are more confident, right? And in this sport where gratification is pretty scarce, and nobody actually really cares that much about trail running yet, as it's still a growing sport, I think this can manifest as this really low level tension among a lot of female competitors, where there's some that are more confident than others, some that are less confident. And this kind of like just is this inner turmoil of women competing for these spots, which are very scarce in this sport. And so that's kind of my thought, is that there's just like this tension right now, as there's this mix of a lot of different women competing for these smaller spots where they're maybe just they're not being as supportive of one another as they can be.
Yeah. And I think this kind of goes into this whole women supporting women, and something we mentioned in the first episode too, about the presence of, female coaches and women, in coaching roles or supportive roles, mentorship, female mentorship. I think this is one of the main ways to kind of grow the sport. And this happens. I know we've spoken a lot about, from our perspectives, that's elite, but I think this goes to anyone. And I think, going back to Lake Sonoma, like a grassroots community event, I think that encourages more women to join, because they maybe not have the confidence, to say, oh, I'm going to go out there and race it. But if you have other girlfriends doing it with you, and, it just, the pressure's off, and it can just be more of this inclusive community thing about the experience rather than, death or winning, and I think that can be a little bit more accessible. And I think that's a good starting place too. And that's what I try to do as a coach, but, also, in the community, in the run community as a whole, and my home base when I finally get there.
Keely, I was wondering, not to put you on the spot, but I was looking through our notes, and I really, really appreciate the quote from Forbes on this, from the "Why Women Don't Always Support Other Women" article. And I'm wondering if you would feel comfortable just reading that entire quote for us, because I think it's really pertinent.
Yeah, absolutely. So Corinne and I found a paper on Forbes about women not supporting other women. And this is one addressing this issue in the workplace. And the article cites This rule governs relationships, power, and self-esteem. For a healthy relationship to be possible between women, the self-esteem and power of one must be, in the eyes of each woman, similar in weight to the self-esteem and power of the other. In other words, these key elements must be kept dead even. And when this power balance gets disrupted, such as a woman rising in the status above other women, women may talk behind her back, ostracize her from the group, or belittle her. These behaviors are to preserve the dead even power relationship that women have grown up with their entire lives. Of course, this is a subconscious process. Most women are not aware of the invisible rule and what drives their behavior, but it is a big reason why women sometimes do not support other women. And I think that's just like super, super relevant to kind of this whole discussion, as it's going to just take a lot more time than we think to change this entire mindset for women in the sport.
Yeah. And it's going to take, I think, we've talked a lot about having other people to kind of, I don't know, lead by example in a lot of ways, having mentors in the sport, having peer mentors in the sport, having, I don't know. So I consider like a peer mentor, someone that's like, you or me, like you're my peer mentor, someone that I can turn to who's really in like a very similar position to me or Hillary. And then having a mentor of something that you're aspiring to. So someone who's a little bit more senior than you, and that dynamic, that power dynamic that they mentioned is going to be a lot different. But that's a person in the sport who you can kind of look to for kind of future steps to moving in this direction that you want to move in. But I think it's that important balance there of, I get it. I get the power balance thing. And I wish that, we've got a long ways to go, I guess, more than anything, but I'm a weirdo. So I can tell the story, while we wait for Hillary to reconnect. One of my best friends in high school who I ski raced with, I'm kind of a weirdo where I'm like really self-competitive. I'm a very competitive person, but I find that I derive a lot of it internally. Like it's me performing my best against myself. And I've always been able to, I found that balance even as a high school athlete, trying to win state meets and that kind of stuff. And my best friend, very comparable, level athlete, we were racing head to head. And when we got to the heat of the competition season, for her, she couldn't be my friend then, which is always this interesting dynamic where it was like, it took me a while to understand why she couldn't be my friend then. Of it's like, oh, okay. Like to her, she can't separate these things. She can't separate me as her competition and me as her friend. And that's, that is what it is. But I think that is still reflected in our current race environment, our current trail environment, where it's like easy to be friends maybe in the training season. And it's harder to be friends maybe when you're trying to get on the start line right next to each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I think another thing is like the sport is still new. And so, I know I entered it where I was seeking gratification from the sport. And so I think that even made it harder to befriend a lot of women in the sport, because like I wanted the gratification and I didn't want them to have it. But I've actually, obviously since then, I've fostered so many amazing female relationships. And I don't think I get more excited for anything than seeing another female crush a race now, especially ones that are near and dear to my heart. And I actually had a really cool chat with my friend Rachel the other day, kind of talking.
We love Rachel
Drake.
We love Rachel.
And she actually had said something along the lines of like, I really want to be able to prioritize being a great friend, as well as being a great athlete and a great partner and a great like employee at my work. And it was kind of just this holistic chat about how, yes, we all have partners. We all have amazing female lady friends we get to crush stuff with. We all have work. We all have other life stressors that come up. And like, how can we balance all of these things so that they all are happy and they're all fulfilling, and that we actually can have a good balance between all of them? Because obviously that's like the hardest thing to do. It's like we don't all just have to prioritize our partners and our friends. We also have to prioritize our work and our life stress. And so, yeah, that kind of just like really gave me a good like time to think about all of those things, because it's all equally important. And so like, how do you feel about like your ability to kind of, not only be getting ready to get married to like your partner and prioritizing friend time, but like you're also planning a wedding and you're coaching and you're writing and we're doing this show, and like, how are you prioritizing all of that?
So I feel like it's a Brad Stuhlberg thing, maybe a Steve Magnus thing about you can't, they talk a lot about, oh, like balance is good. Or like they said that society talks about balance being good. And they're like, no, sometimes your life is going to be super, super lopsided. And that's okay. Like sometimes you have to go all in on something. And so it's like right now, like my training is not my priority. Like the week I was in Chamonix, my training was not the priority. I was there for work was the priority. Work and seeing some people were the priority. This week it's the wedding is the priority. And I'm in a fortunate position where I don't have a race around the corner. And that's like, it allows me, but I also chose to not have a race around the corner. Right. I looked at my schedule, I looked at my year and I said, hey, this is when this is going to happen. I know that work is going to be busy. I know that I'm going to deprioritize running for a hot second and prioritize my relationship and my job. At the same time, I'm sending out an email to all my athletes tomorrow being like, hey, for those of you who don't know, like I'm getting married this weekend. So I will not be checking my emails until next week. Like, peace out. Because it's like, and they, and they are understanding of that, of me taking that time. So I do think it's a fallacy to think that you have to have perfect balance in every single aspect of your life at every single moment. And we found that even like with our relationship, like there are times where I'm the rock and like I'm the support for Steven. And there's sometimes where Steven has to be the rock, like, or the lifeboat or whatever, like where it's like we move to a new place and Steven has community and I don't yet or something. It's like, okay, I'm going to rely on you a lot. I'm going to lean on to you more than I normally do because like we're in this situation. So I think that same sort of thing goes for running time, family time, relationship time, friend time, work time. Those things are all important. And it's important that we try to juggle those things, but there's going to be phases of the year where like something's got to give. So for my athletes, it's like I look at race time and I look at their peak volume weeks. And I say, hey, I am pretty confident that this is when this week is going to hit, looking at the long range plan, that could change with sickness or injury or whatnot. But that's the week where I need you to have your support system on board with you being a little less present, with you maybe not being the best worker, with you maybe not getting as much family time that week, because that is the week that is really important. Or these are the 2 weeks that are really important. And I think as long as you go into it with a game plan and you realize that it's going to get skewed for that week or that day or whatever it is, I think that is how you maintain balance in the big picture. Like micro cycle, there's no balance. Macro cycle, there's some balance. Hillary, I don't know if you have, obviously you're on a book tour right now. You're trying to come to my wedding. You're training because you had to drop out of UTMB and you've got another race on your calendar because you're a badass and you've got to go do that. So it's like, got a race on your calendar, currently on an unconventional book tour in a van, trying to come to my wedding because you're my support system. That's a lot to balance. And so you're training too, and you've got athletes and other shit to do. So like, how are you currently finding some semblance of balance? You had a post on Instagram about this the other day, actually, that I think is kind of pertinent.
I am balancing a lot of things. The great thing about having another race on the schedule is that I have another race on the schedule, but it's also, I know I have to balance all of these things and it can seem like a moving target. And I know all of you are not, you're in the same boat as me. You're doing the same exact thing. And so for me, I try to think about it as a matter of perspective. So I try to shift it. And this is actually something I heard from Mario Friuli on one of his podcasts. But it's about viewing something as a priority versus a sacrifice. And so, if this week, it's a really important week of training, well, then I'm going to prioritize those more. And some of the things kind of take a back seat. Versus, if this week I have a lot of work meetings to do and I'm, more recovering from a race or in a recovery week or just a lower volume week of training, things can kind of ebb and flow in that way. But for me, it also helps it keep in perspective, like why I like to do these things. Why is something a priority? And for me, it can, especially for running, not only does it revolve around, racing, but it's also something that brings a lot of joy, or, a break from work and mental health and these kinds of things. But yeah, it can be a lot to manage. And also something I love about coaching, and, doing podcasts like these, it's, and that's why I love it so much, is because I feel like it's a way to kind of give back to the community, and it feeds my soul in a really good way. And so, yeah, it's really easy to prioritize time to do this, and to, engage with the runners that I coach, and, really put my all into that as well. But yeah, I think it's just a balancing act, but also it's all worth it.
So one thing I think we can add here too is kind of tying in so balance is hard, but I think the pandemic was a really interesting learning curve. I know I had a bunch of athletes who we took a different tact at the pandemic. And what I mean by that is that we instead of them training more because they weren't commuting, they slept more and they had more family time. They didn't train more. They just did the other things better. And I actually think, Keely, you did something really similar to that, where I feel like you addressed the pandemic and your work-life balance differently, and use the flexibility you were given to you took advantage of it. So I'm really curious to know how the pandemic shifted your ability to balance those things. If it gave you more flexibility or less flexibility, what did that look like? Because I feel like it did, because of the three of us, you have an office job. You have to report somewhere to do work. So what did the pandemic do for you as far as finding that balance?
Yeah, I think that I got pretty lucky with how my workplace responded to the pandemic. So I was able to work remotely for the first time in my whole, career. And that really gave me a lot more flexibility than I was used to. And so I think at first that manifested in a very inefficient way. I was very confused as to what to do with all this time. But then I think I really got to the point where I was able to really juggle work, training, my partnerships and my friendships way easier, because I no longer had to plan for commuting, for experiments at different times of the day. I really got to set my own schedule. I could work, in the early hours of the morning if that suited me better, or in the later hours of the evening. And then I could kind of prioritize all of that around my training. And so for me, the pandemic shift in my work really helped. Now, obviously, because I work in research, working with humans, it's not going to be forever because you can only get so much work from home work done when you actually need to conduct experiments for what you do. But I'd say it's really helped me figure out the balance. And I think some of these skills I'll be able to take into the future when we do require going back to the office. And remember that we do have more time than we think if we are strategic with what we do with our times, and just kind of eliminate some of that time that kind of gets built in as fluff, where you can't really remember what you did during, that said hour that went by. So yeah, I think I've felt pretty grateful. I'd actually found another article on Forbes. They were killing it with articles for this episode, obviously, where they were talking about how women might have become advantageous from this COVID shift in working, because they were already kind of used to juggling a lot of different responsibilities around the house. However, now they didn't have to plan for commuting or, getting changed to look really, really presentable at work and do all of these things on top of all of the housework. And so this article kind of talks to the women actually finding a holy grail of working, which is pretty cool. And I definitely can resonate with that.
Yeah, I think that balance is that for a lot of women, it did create some balance. And for people in general, it created balance. But at the same time, too, there have been articles out there by the Washington Post and the New York Times that have said, when people return to the workforce, this was in part when we were looking at, is childcare readily available? Is school happening, right? Schooling and childcare all of a sudden fell on who? It fell primarily on moms at home with these kids. And so it was yes, they don't have to do X, Y, or Z, but fun new change. You also have to figure out how to get your kindergartner onto a Zoom session for Zoom art at 1 p.m. while you're also supposed to be on some other sort of call presenting, for whatever you do the rest of your time. So it's yes, I do think that, I think women crushed the pandemic in part because we went into it with the ability to multitask. We are inherently, I think, the better sex at multitasking. But I think that the responsibility of like children being at home for the parents during the pandemic, it fell on the women. And I think that was a burden. And I think less women will return to the workforce because of that, both positively and negatively. There are women who are going to love what and men who are going to love what they're transitioning into doing. But I do think that there was a detriment to a lot of working moms in that sense as well, particularly when it came to having kids at home who couldn't be unsupervised, right? High school kids, they can do whatever. Kindergartners, yeah, they need help on Zoom, and your third grader can definitely help them, but it's still a little bit trying. But I think this ties really well into like your pandemic experience, Keely. I think ties in really well to what we witnessed at Western States. For you personally, like you invested in that race. You said, hey, I'm going to prioritize this thing. I'm going to use my PTO. I'm going to go get this training in. And the Keely that we saw show up at Western States was super happy and super confident in her training. And I'm just wondering, I think this is kind of how we'll start to close out the show is I think that was because of balance. So can you speak to that? Like what balance you found and how did that make you a better runner to get the best out of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the beginning of the pandemic, I didn't have that balance. So I took all of my extra time and invested it in running in a very like negative way. And then I think over time, as you realize you have this extra time to invest in things, you realize that you can invest it in like making your personal relationships better and making you a better friend and learning something new at work. And that kind of all molds you into this human being that's like confident in themselves, regardless of running. And so I think ultimately, like I decided to invest a lot of time in training for Western States, but I also invested a lot of time in myself and becoming more confident and happy outside of running. And I think that kind of translated to running and vice versa, right? As my running became better and less stressful, that also translated to having better like success in the day-to-day life. Because one of my dearest friends, Danielle Snyder, who's like a licensed clinical social worker, she works with like athletes from Olympics to trail running. She always says stress is stress is stress. And we can't forget that like running stress is similar to our bodies as life stress, right? And so I think what I ended up doing was just trying to eliminate all of those stressors. And so by eliminating some of the stress I had tied up in my mind around running in my day-to-day life, freed up some space for new things and also ultimately reduced a lot of the stress I had on my body. And so, yeah, I think going into Western, it was probably the first training block where I was of the best mindset I've ever been. My training definitely was not ideal with my broken ankle and taking a ton of time off, but mindset is a lot in this sport. And so going in, I was confident in my mindset and in the training I did get. And so yeah, it was easy to be really excited for the race, regardless of things I could have been very stressed about.
Yeah, you had that mental well to pull from. I think Dylan Bowman talked about this a lot, and Tim Tollefson talks about this a lot about needing to go into the race, not with a physical well to draw from, but with a mental well to draw from, because they're going to bury themselves out there. And so they need to have that reserve in mind. So I think, yeah, key takeaways from today is that check the ego. Everyone's got to check the ego. Open communication between all supporting members is incredibly crucial. And then, yeah, stress is stress, and that balance is not always perfect. The active balance, sometimes imbalance, and that's totally okay, because in the big picture, we find balance through that. So I think that we're running out of time. Hillary's got other things to do besides and then start driving towards me. So I guess I'd like to finish up with our society slam. So one of the big ones we want to touch on is that we actually were reached out to by one of the women who was greatly impacted by the, let's call it the controlled stop of TDS. Tara, she was stuck behind the fall, but out of Bourg St. Maurice. So she was up on a pretty exposed hillside, I would say. And they were not required to carry a winter kit. So they used every piece of gear they had on them, which did include an emergency blanket. And they were left in this position of being unsure of if they were going to get to continue, then getting mixed messages that some people were allowed to continue, but they weren't going to be allowed to continue. And just like talking about how, people are still going to be grappling with this, from all sides. They're still grappling with the fact that someone passed away, that is incredibly tragic, but also that their race that they had trained for, that was the thing that they had worked years to get into, to be a small percentage of those women who got to finish, be so subtly stopped and then turned around, I think was something that this listener was still very much working through. And we really appreciated that. We really appreciated hearing from people who were out there. She sent us photos of everyone in their space blankets up on the trail, looking very, very cold out into the early morning hours before they were allowed to walk back down. So yeah, that was really cool to hear. And we're very, we're thinking about all the runners whose race day was ended, and also for the runner who lost his life again, because that, I think, is still really, it's been a year of tragedy in the ultra world. And I think that we're all still grappling with loss in a couple different races at this point.
Really touching on, this runner, Tara. She's a good friend of mine, she was there kind of witnessing everything that happened in TDS and having to, stop her race. I actually saw her after the race and was up at the Aiguille de Midi mid station, and we kind of got to hug it out and, talk about things. And it obviously really deeply affected her, not just of what happened in the event itself, but also just, of her race, something that she really trained hard for. And then having to stop that. And this is also something that I wanted to say from, our previous episode. I had said that all of the races had required their cold weather kit. And that was just an assumption on my part, since I assumed that TDS had the cold weather kit mandated to them just because, they had thunderstorms forecasted from 3 to 8 p.m. And Tara actually corrected me and said that they were not. You get a little text update from the race organization, the day before the race, and they actually did not require a cold weather kit. So this is also why, she sent a photo of, her and all the other runners on the side of a mountain in their emergency blankets. And so, yeah, that was really touching to hear from her. But yeah, keep at it, sending us messages. I get a lot of, encouragement and just engagement. And so, keep showing us some love. Actually, someone who I did the Society Slam with last week, she messaged me and said she listened to the episode, and it was awesome to hear her comment to be listened, be listed. So, but that's it for me.
Yeah. And then I had one, or I guess I've had a lot, but one that's really, really important to us is how we can kind of address female athletes and coaching female athletes and talking about a lot of topics with both male and female coaches, with emphasis on male coaches, so that they can, really start to try and help female athletes around the world. So we're definitely going to address that in a future episode, get a little bit of a roundtable going there. And so we're really excited for that, and keep these messages coming. We love hearing from you. And we hope that you guys can leave this episode with a little bit more insight into how to balance this crazy sport of ours, because we obviously understand that the training that goes into these races and the amount of time is vast. And so keep hanging in there and stay positive and keep that stress level low, and you'll continue to just be the best version of yourself out there on the trails.
Yeah. A happy runner is a fast runner, is a happy home life as well. So slide into your DMs with feedback on this episode. We love to hear from you. It's really great insight into the community. What are you all thinking? What are you seeing out there? Both about this topic that we covered today and other topics that we're hoping to cover in the future. We'll see you out there on the trails. Thank you so much for listening to Trail Society.